Ladies and gentlemen, the directors of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway are proud to present a competition, the Rainhill Locomotive Trials of 1829. And the directors have put up a prize of £500 for the fastest and most reliable means of locomotion for our new railway. The entrants are as follows. Messrs. Braithwaite and Ericsson of London with the Novelty. Mr. Hackworth of Darlington with the Sans Pareil. Mr. Robert Stephenson of Newcastle upon Tyne with the Rocket. And Mr. Burstall of Edinburgh with the Perseverance. All of these are steam locomotives, but there's a great local interest in Mr. Brandreth's cycloped. Mr. Brandreth is a local gentleman who will doubtless be known to a great many of you. His locomotive is propelled by a horse trotting on a species of treadmill. Well, these are the contestants, ladies and gentlemen. We look forward to stout competition, a suitable result, and a prosperous future for the new Liverpool and Manchester Railway, which will be open next year. Thank you very much.
There was an atmosphere of excitement and festivity on Tuesday, the 6th of October, 1829, when over 10,000 people gathered together to watch 2 weeks of planned tests. But for George Stephenson, it was all suspense, truly the trial of his idea for changing the face of the earth. Unable to read until he was 18, and never much of a hand at writing, he was a brilliant, self-taught mechanic who played an enormous part in the development of the steam locomotive, and has rightly been called the father of the railroad. Having completed the Stockton to Darlington line, by sheer force of character, he was able to convince doubters and override tremendous opposition so as to build the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. His true genius was as a civil engineer, the organizer of success. And in 1826, he was appointed principal engineer on this first ever intercity line. His achievement in the years 1826 to 1830 was to plan and oversee the construction of 31 miles of double railway track through difficult country, which involved a steep climb in a tunnel at the Liverpool end, several awkward bridges and viaducts, and the notorious bogland of Chat Moss, into which everything was known to sink. George Stephenson managed the labour force, ordered and inspected the materials, staked in fact his whole future on technical innovations. Yet he was so much a man of the people that he found making his first public speech a terrible ordeal.
If I could but have seen my meeting so many gentlemen at the assembly rooms, I might have lit a candle at my face, Jane.
That'll be for having a bonny ruffle to the shirt, new, and then they'll be looking to another old friend.
No, Jane. I'll never see no change in me.
And she never did. He remained arrogant, blunt, and a visionary. There wasn't another engineer in the world who shared his vision of the sheer potential of railway lines fitted out with steam engines designed to run on them. He alone could see railways as an entity, their construction, power, management, the whole picture. George Stephenson believed absolutely in the railroad as the main traffic artery of the future. He was the only person who did. By 1829, the intercity line was well on the way to completion. For the first time, a smooth and level track had been laid for wagon wheels. Transporting goods would be faster than ever before. But the railway's directors still hadn't decided just how those loaded wagons were to be pulled along.
Order, gentlemen, order!
But I tell you, horses may yet be the answer.
Mr. Cropper, that's plain daft. Begging your pardon, Mr. Chairman. I have never considered horse traction as anything but a slow and uneconomical method of hauling. Steam engines, specially designed to run on railways, are what's needed for this job.
Now spare us the story of how well it works at Killingworth, the entire 9 miles from Colliery to coast. We're not dealing with coal here, Stephenson, and the distance to be covered is more than treble that. Now, gentlemen, our own Mr. Brandreth has put forward an idea. The cycloped, to be powered by a horse trotting on a species of treadmill. No risk of breakdown, you see.
Horses? Trotting? But, Mr. Booth, when I was appointed to this railroad...
Mr. Brandreth is a shareholder, but recently retired from serving on the railway board.
Yes, we can all vouch for Thomas Brandreth. He's a prime judge of horseflesh and a true sportsman. I, for one, think his idea deserves our serious consideration.
Mr. Copper, I thought it was the delays and cost of road and canal transport that we're hardly satisfied with. And I'm telling her that the locomotive is the answer to that problem.
Not necessarily, Stephenson. Just because you managed to sell a steam engine made in your locomotive works to the gullible directors of the Stockton and Darlington line is no reason for us to follow their example. Rather the reverse, in fact. Tell us now, didn't that very steam engine blow up only last year?
Aye. Locomotion blew up. But we built her a new boiler now. And Tim Atworth, who looks after the engines on that line, he says it's running right funny.
But a man was killed.
Does I think I don't know?
Timothy Hackworth has invented an engine of his own, I believe.
Aye, Mr. Booter. The Royal George. I told him I hoped there was no name for me. It is costing too much in repairs and regular maintenance to have my full approval. But I'm sure locomotives will soon be running smoothly. And at 20 miles an hour.
That's preposterous, Stephenson. Anyway, speed is one thing and reliability quite another. I don't trust these moving machines. We don't even know whether yours blew up because the safety valve stuck or simply because it ran out of water.
Well, we were no there. But I'm told that the safety valve arm had been tied down with cord. A suicidal habiters, I think they'll all agree. Man, the Stockton and Darlington line is the first mechanically operated railway in the world, and it's functioning. We're learning something every day, one way or another. Why, we've got spring valves now, and half unbreakable wheels.
Well, gentlemen, if Mr. Brandreth's idea with regard to the horses isn't to be taken up, then it's my opinion, I'm an orthodox fellow, that we should use cable traction. That's to say, we put stationary steam engines every 1.5 miles, which will propel the wagon by means of wire ropes and pulleys.
Cable traction, fixed engine. But think of the future, man. Go up to Darlington yourself and see these bunny machines running. Have a word with Tim Atworth. Young's an engineer with a dream. Stand up beside him on the footplate. And then come back and tell me, and tell this whole assembly, that it's horses or cable traction for Liverpool. You're all it. Pah!
But that part of the line not yet completed, the Liverpool terminus up to Edge Hill. Now, that gradient will be too steep for your locomotives anyway, George. Isn't that so?
Aye, Mr. Booth.
You see, Stephenson, cable traction will have to be used there, so we might as well be consistent.
Consistent with the 18th century.
Let's ask Stephenson's son about this. Robert, now what do you think? In your opinion, what motive power should be used?
I believe, as my father does, that the locomotive will leave its mark on the map of the world.
Well, you would say that, because you see, he's his father's right-hand man.
No, Mr. Copper. I don't deny I had Bobby educated so that he could know my communicating for me, so that he can put the polish on my thoughts and his thoughts. But he's been away these 3 years in South America. He's his own man, Mr. Booth.
Very well, Robert. Your honest viewpoint now.
Rely upon it, locomotives shall not cowardly be given up. I will fight for them until the last.
They're worthy of a conflict.
By God, but you're a fellow of powerful imagination and a stubborn will.
Aye, and sound judgment.
It's true. A man who can bridge Chat Moss may achieve anything. I vote we give his locomotives a try.
I'll no regret it, Mr. Booth. I tell you, man, they'll never regret it.
We'll need ones of adequate power to cover such a distance, and they must be lighter than those already in use elsewhere. More reliable in service.
That's true, George. The suitable machine has yet to be developed.
I'll work on it, sir.
But why shouldn't everyone work on it?
Now, I'm not sure I understand you, James.
Why not hold a series of tests? If steam engines can prove themselves in open competition, I say if they can, well, it'll give us something to build on. We could offer prize money to attract entrants, say £500
For a locomotive travelling at not less than 10 miles an hour, hauling, say, 3 tons for every ton of its own weight. I like the idea.
Where would the trials be held?
Over a level stretch some 2 miles long, backwards and forwards, until the journey is the equivalent of that to Manchester and back, eh? Now, what's the best place, George?
Rain Hill, sir. Just outside Liverpool. And may I suggest that each locomotive has an entire day of test to itself. That would make for less confusion.
Good, good. Now, how many entrants do we anticipate?
No more than a dozen, I'd say.
Very well. You'll agree that £500 is a worthy prize?
£500 and the chance to work the first railway line between cities. Aye.
I'll have the advertisement printed directly. Now, allowing 6 months for the building, that will bring us to early October. Yes. Well, gentlemen, this has been a most profitable meeting. And I must not detain you any longer. I thank you all for your time.
Aye. Come on in then. Come on, Bobby. We've work to do.
So, fella, it's going to be an open contest. Who do you think will enter? Civilic's too old now, I fancy. Anyway, I doubt he has the spirit or the money. You remember that when I came across him in New York, I had to give him his fare back to Cornwall.
Thank God they don't know that locomotion's blown up again. Look. I must get myself home to Newcastle and stir things up at the factory while I put pen to paper here. And mind to keep the lugs wide open.
What for?
Tim Hackworth.
Timothy Hackworth? But he was your foreman.
Aye. Well, the Royal George is no quite such a liability as I'd have them believe. And who does that think's been improving the steam engine while I was over in South America and I've been here in Liverpool? I've been concentrating on making the best roads for locomotives, while Timothy there has been out a while gaining vital, practical experience of the machines themselves, the running, the maintenance. He's a clever engineer, is Tim Hackworth. And I must never forget he was taught by a master craftsman.
So the 26-year-old Robert Stephenson returned to his factory, the factory his father had opened in his name back in 4th Street, Newcastle. And George himself returned home to Upper Parliament Street with his mind a ferment of ideas. Having all but built the finest railway known, was the chance of running his own engines on it about to be snatched away from him? His fears with regard to Timothy Hackworth, his former apprentice, were by no means unfounded. Hackworth, as the world's first railway shedmaster, had been for the past 3 years in daily touch with the assets and liabilities of these new machines. With their barrel-like boilers mounted on spindly spoked wheels, the first railway engines were nothing like those we remember. They were a far cry from the Flying Scot, with its familiar noisy rhythm and penetrating whistle, being almost silent in operation. In addition to this, any locomotive George thought about at all had to be cheap to run, and it must effectually consume its own smoke, a major rule laid down by the railway company. So, for example, whilst understanding the principle of the blast pipe, George was quite unable to incorporate a fierce blast. No such legal restrictions curbed Timothy Hackworth on the colliery line, his sole aim being to make his engines steam and give maximum performance. He was able to narrow the exhaust steam outlet until all his locomotives vomited cinders and their stacks glowed red hot. In dry seasons, the Northumbrian Company was forced to employ men at the side of the track to beat out any fires his engines caused before they took a real hold of the countryside. Yes, George had a worry, all right. And what of Robert back at the factory, trying to put his father's designs into tangible form? The 4th Street workshop boasted one small steam engine with a 16-inch cylinder to drive the few lathes, the planers, and the drilling, punching, and plate-shearing machines. Apart from this, everything was done by hand. Wheels were driven onto their axles with sledgehammers, and another 8 years would pass before a crane was brought into the work. At present, all the heavy lifting was done by means of portable shear legs and pulley blocks. Of course, these primitive conditions meant big risks for the men, and there were frequent accidents. On 2 different occasions, George Stephenson's own brother and his brother-in-law were killed. He was deeply grieved and continued to give financial support to their widows and children. Yet, despite lack of many facilities in the little factory, the quality of workmanship produced was astonishing.
Well, Father, there she is. All 4 ton 300 weight of her. Lacking only a lick of paint. You pleased with your work?
Man, our work, Bobby. A rocket here will be a joint entry. Thou, me, and Henry Boone. Bless the man and his multitubular boiler. What a treasurer that he's no so daft, eh?
Never thought he was. He was kindly disposed towards us at every meeting.
Well. It's one thing for me to send them my drawings and specifications, and quite another for that I can construct a machine. I'm proud of that, lad.
Inclined outside cylinders and a multi-tubular boiler. But you ought to get up some speed.
What's happening over it, children? How's Tim Hackworth faring?
He calls his new invention the sans pareil.
Does he?
He's got vertical cylinders, that I do know, being as we made them for him. And I've heard she's heavier than the rocket by 500 weight or thereabouts.
Oh, how many wheels?
Just a 4.
Aye, then we've got him, lad. 4's no enough. Under the set conditions of the trials, I'd say it's too heavy to be mounted on only 4 wheels.
Hope you're right. Who's the other entrants?
There were meant to be 9, but only 3 are ready. Apart from Hackworth, there's a London firm and a laddie from Edinburgh. That's all. Unless I means to count Tommy Brandreth with his damned horsepower.
They're surely not permitted to run that contraption.
Nah, well, he's a shareholder, so they can all rightly stop him. Never mind. It may be served to keep the ladies amused.
So there's a field of 4.
Aye. I'd like best for us to be the final entry. On the very last day.
Is that a good thing?
It is with the show we're going to make. Come away now to the house. What fair clem. And it's a long time since I saw my daughter-in-law.
Just get me hat and coat. Tomorrow we'll try it out at Killingworth, and the lads can start the painting.
Bobby, our colours.
Yellow and black, we agree.
Aye. But with a white chimney stack.
A white chimney? But why, Father?
Because wearing a white hat, they'll surely stand out in a crowd, man.
By the 6th of October, when the first Rainhill trials began, the railway company had received suggestions from every mad inventor in the known world. But there were only 3 real challengers. 3 iron horses in their own colours limbering up, with a grandstand built for the ladies and enclosures like any race meeting. They each, hauling a train 3 times their own weight, had to go up and down the course 20 times, a total distance of 60 miles, at a speed of not less than 10 miles an hour. The time and fuel required to raise a full head of steam from cold was to be noted, together with the amount of fuel used and the amount of water evaporated. A band played throughout the day, and the neighbouring railroad tavern did brisk business. But amongst the festive crowd of more than 10,000 people were many seriously interested engineers from all over the world. These trials were being held to select the best locomotives depending on its speed, weight, power, consumption, and smoke. So there was a great number of critical observers present. News arrived that the Perseverance from Edinburgh had been overturned and damaged in transit, and it was not until the last day of the competition that it reached Rainhill. Its owner, having in the meantime seen his rivals perform, said he stood no chance, and the Perseverance was withdrawn, but not before making one short demonstration run, when it was described by an observer as going
Full 6 miles an hour cranking away like an old wickerwork pair of panniers on a cantering goody ass.
The rocket, which had been shipped in pieces to Liverpool, was not, as George had hoped, the final competitor. In fact, it was put through its paces the first of any.
George, my dear fellow, such a moment. I simply had to wish you good fortune.
Luck can no enter into it, Mr. Booth. In one fell swoop, we've increased the heating surface on our boiler, and therefore the power of our engine. And it's our thanks to that multitubular thinking. Let me have the hands up.
Gladly. And yours, Robert. It's splendid work. A proud day for us all. We haven't won yet.
Bah! They're overcautious, laddie. We've a bonny machine. The best fireman in Mr. McCree here.
The finest driver, I know.
Now that you mention it, who is the driver?
I took his hand not a minute since.
But not you. George.
Aye?
But is it wise? Forgive me, I mean...
You mean I'm 48 years old, I know.
But was there no one in Newcastle? At the colliery? Like McCree?
Tell him, Bobby.
Engine men are not the most manageable class of beings. I sometimes think they want improving as much as the engine.
So I'm driving up. Clap that chin up, man. We're the lads of the day.
Indeed, indeed, George. God bless me, yes. Go to it, old fellow.
And so the rocket set off, pulling a weight of 12 tons, 900 weight at just over 10 miles per hour. It made 18 miles per hour when the weight was removed.
A respectable enough result, Father. I doubt they can fault us.
It was no exciting, no. Before our trials are over, our plant will take off, fully loaded, up an incline, and so prove that their fixed engines are not necessary.
But why take the risk? Hauling heavy wagons up a hill isn't part of the contest. Besides, what if she fails?
What?
Believe me, Father, we've done enough already. They must be impressed.
But next came the gleaming novelty, the popular choice. Only half the weight of the rocket and not much more than a platform on wheels with an upright boiler, it gave a visual impression of speed and lightness which delighted the crowd. And against the rules, began by first testing merely its own speed, the rate at which it could go carrying only its necessary coke and water. It darted off at 28 miles per hour, actually completing 1 mile in under 2 minutes.
Well, Father, the Londoners appear to have the crowd with them. At that rate, she could make Manchester in an hour.
Covered in copper like a new tune.
Apparently, her builders have publicly offered to stake £1,000 that as soon as your railroad's completed, she'll perform the whole distance in that time.
I tell you, man, we needn't fear yon thing. Her's got no guts. We've yet to see her prove herself pulling the wagons. That's the real test.
Nobody did see the novelty prove itself at hauling that first day. There was a sudden dull explosion, followed by a belch of smoke and sparks from its hindquarters. A blowback from the furnace had burst the leather of the mechanical bellows, and by the time the engine was ready to make a second trip, it was so late that the trials were put off till the following morning. But to Jonah's indignation, the onlookers went home singing the novelty's praises. This report in the Liverpool Mercury speaks for them all.
It seemed indeed to fly, presenting one of the most sublime spectacles of human ingenuity and human daring the world has ever beheld. It actually made one giddy to look at it, and filled thousands with lively fears for the safety of the individuals who were on it, and who seemed not to run along the earth, but to fly, as it were, on the wings of the wind.
But, alas for the novelty, it was unable to demonstrate its flying prowess the next day because of various delays and faults. Nor on the following days, although it did manage one round of 3 miles on the Saturday, the last day of the first week's trials. It couldn't manage a second round because the joints on the pipe from the feed pump to the boiler failed, so that water flew about in all directions. On the very first day of the competition, Timothy Hackworth had also met with trouble, struggling with a leaking boiler on the Sans-Pareil and begging for more time to get his machine ready. In fact, during the entire week, the Rocket was the only locomotive to go consistently up and down the trial stretch when ordered, carrying its full load in accordance with the rules. While he waited for the other entrants, who were messing about with their engines, doing spectacular sprints and then collapsing, George and the Rocket did extra exhibition runs, showing off its speed and reliability. But the crowd remained faithful to the glamorous-looking novelty, still considering the Rocket too big and too ugly. On the Monday, Timothy Hackworth's Sans-Pareil ran for 2 hours, shooting lumps of red-hot coke from its chimney.
It rumbled and rolls about like an empty beer bottle or rough pavement. The boiler runs out very much. He had to feed it with more meal than would fatten a pig.
Not surprisingly, Sans-Pareil consumed 692 pounds of coke an hour, as compared with the Rocket's 217 pounds. Then, abruptly, it disappeared from view in a cloud of steam. The lead fusible plug above the fire had melted, owing to lack of water in the boiler. A crowd of willing spectators pushed it to the nearest blacksmith's. Hackworth never got it going again, but this hardly mattered as the judges finally disqualified the engine for being well over the stipulated weight for a 4-wheeled locomotive. On Wednesday, the Novelty returned to action, after 4 days and nights of constant work by its engineers, during which time it had been taken to pieces and wholly rebuilt. After doing 2 round trips, fully loaded at last, a boiler pipe gave way. Its owners, realizing this would take weeks to repair, withdrew the lightweight machine from the trials. In the meantime, Rocket continued to prove itself the best engine, reaching even higher speeds, fully loaded, than the week before. George also made it do demonstration runs up a 1 in 96 incline, which it climbed easily, again fully loaded, at 12 miles per hour, about twice the speed that any fixed engine could haul wagons up a gradient. This was a triumph not even the crowd could ignore. Rocket had done 70 miles without any fault. Its closest rival hadn't even managed half that distance without breaking down several times. And now the judges, 2 highly qualified civil engineers and a Manchester cotton spinner, had no hesitation in awarding the £500 prize to the Rocket. An order was immediately placed for 4 engines to the same design.
Well done, George. Never was a prize more richly deserved. Oh, well done.
Thanks for all the help, Mr. Booth.
We mustn't forget your son either. Congratulations, Robert. A magnificent effort. You're the hero of the hour.
I'm only 26, Mr. Booth. Father here's been designing his locomotives for 15 years.
Well, he's proved their capabilities now.
Aye. It was a rugged machine, right enough.
The railway contract is yours, George.
The world's mine, Mr. Booth.
What? What's that?
Father means that now the rocket and thousands like her will tirelessly keep the traffic moving.
Night and day.
Just as you always prophesied.
Year after year.
Aye. We'll live to see the rocket and thousands like her utter in the face of the earth.
As the song of the time said, then hurrah for King Steam, whose wild whistle and scream gives notice to friends and to foes. As he makes the dust fly and goes thundering by, so stand clear and make room for King Steam.
King Steam was written by Lesley Clive and directed by Bill Morrison. The narrator was Bill Bingham. George Stephenson was played by George Costigan, Robert Stephenson by Philip Donaghy, Henry Booth by Paul Harmon, James Cropper by Philip Rudyard, and Jane by Valerie Lilly. The engineer was Dave Cockram, producer Phil Easton, executive producer David Maker.